The Gunsmoke cast wrapped their final episode in March of 1975. Over 50 years later, the lights in Dodge City are mostly out. 7 of these 8 people have passed away, with the last lost landing in December of 2025. Only one actor remains. Number 1 on our list is the man who stood taller than the rest combined. James Arness stood 6 feet 7 barefoot when Seabass scouted for Marshal Matt Dillon in the spring of 1955. John Wayne turned it down, recommending his buddy Jim. They listened. Arness wore that badge for 20 straight years across 635 episodes, securing the longest dramatic lead run on American television until 2010. The slight limp viewers noticed throughout the show's run was not acting. On February 1st, 1944, a 20-year-old rifleman with the 7th Infantry was ordered off the landing craft first at Anzio beachhead because his height could help gauge the water and save lives. A German machine gun nest shattered his right leg before dawn. He spent the rest of that year in evacuation hospitals across Italy, Iowa, and Colorado. He brought home a Purple Heart and Bronze Star. His leg never fully healed, but he hid that limp from the cameras for 20 years using clever blocking and a long stride. Behind the scenes, he carried a deep grief he never shared publicly. His daughter, Jenny Lee, died of an overdose in 1975 at age 24, weeks before the show ended. In 1977, his first wife, Virginia, died of the same cause. His adopted son, Craig, a National Geographic photographer, died of West Nile in 2004. Arness stayed completely silent about these tragedies. His second marriage to Janet Surtees lasted 33 years, holding strong until his final morning. Arness passed away peacefully on June 3, 2011, at his Brentwood, California home at age 88. Years before, he penned a final farewell letter for his website, asking to publish it the day he died. He thanked his fans and celebrated his favorite projects. Today, he rests in Glendale's Forest Lawn Memorial Park, inside the Sanctuary of Abiding Hope, Crypt 16174. Marshal Matt Dillon was the anchor Dodge City depended on. James Arness endured a leg full of shrapnel under that badge for 20 years to keep the show going without ever complaining. Our number 2 arrived at the Long Branch Saloon a year after Arness, staying for 19 seasons. Amanda Blake was born Beverly Louise Neal in Buffalo, New York in 1929, the daughter of a banker. She worked as a telephone operator in Claremont, California when Mencken signed her in the late 1940s, trying to market her as the next Greer Garson. But the studio eventually gave up on that comparison and let her go. She was 26 when cast as the red-headed saloon owner who would become one of the most quietly powerful female roles on American television. As Miss Kitty, she ran a room full of armed men without ever asking permission. Her unspoken connection with Matt Dillon, never fully realized on screen, became one of TV's greatest unfulfilled love stories. Blake sold that chemistry with just a glance. Whenever he walked through the door, she married 5 times, but left no children. Her 4th husband, Frank Gilbert, was her true soulmate, together on a ranch outside Phoenix. They launched one of the world's first captive cheetah breeding programs, actively preserving 7 generations of the species. Her 5th marriage to Austin Councilman Mark Spaeth in 1984 ended just 10 months later when he died of AIDS-related pneumonia in 1985. Back in 1961, she sold her Gunsmoke residuals for a flat $100,000, a decision she regretted forever as the hit show ran in syndication for the next 6 decades, benefiting others. She finally walked away from the series after season 19 in 1974. Exhausted by the commute and clashing with producers over outfits and scripts, she chose to dedicate her remaining energy to protecting vulnerable animals. She co-founded the Performing Animal Welfare Society, maximizing her impact by building Arizona's largest no-kill sanctuary. Amanda Blake passed away at Mercy General Hospital in Sacramento on August 16, 1989, at age 60. Her doctor publicly listed the cause as AIDS-related complications, correcting early family claims of throat cancer. The oral cancer she beat years before was actually in complete remission when she died. As she wished, she was cremated, and her friend, wildlife reporter Roger Ewing, took her ashes to a Kenyan game preserve to scatter them. A cenotaph bearing her birth name still stands at Elmwood Cemetery in Birmingham, Alabama, the city where she attended high school. Miss Kitty was always the one who commanded the room. Amanda Blake dedicated her final 15 years to maximizing animal welfare, asking to be returned to Africa in the end. Which piece of her legacy hits hardest? The cheetah sanctuary in Phoenix, the tragic 10-month marriage, or her final return to the wild in Kenya? Drop a comment and let me know. The third guy on this list barely said a word per episode, yet viewers recognized his face anywhere. Glenn Strange stood behind the Long Branch bar for 12 years. Standing 6'5", he mostly polished the same glass while Miss Kitty ran the floor. He was part of the Dodge City scenery, and the show simply could not have survived without him. Born George Glenn Strange in Weed, New Mexico Territory back in August of 1899, 13 years before New Mexico became a state, he spent his 20s working as a deputy sheriff, a rodeo bronco rider, and a country band fiddler, before drifting into Hollywood in the early 1930s as a stuntman in cheap westerns. He spent 2 decades playing outlaws and henchmen in hundreds of films before getting the life-changing call from Universal in 1944. The legendary Boris Karloff had walked away from the Frankenstein makeup. Strange replaced him, getting coached personally by Karloff in after-hours sessions. He played the monster 3 times. House of Frankenstein in 1944, House of Dracula in 45, and Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein in 48. His face is actually the one on almost every classic monster Halloween mask ever sold. In 1969, the New York Times accidentally printed Karloff's obituary with a photo of Strange in his monster makeup. Lung cancer hit him in 1972, but he kept showing up to the Gunsmoke set as long as he had the strength. In July of 1973, he attended the funeral of his close buddy, Lon Chaney Jr., speaking at the service despite being gravely ill himself. Just 2 months later, on September 20th, 1973, he died of lung cancer in Los Angeles at age 74. 5 Gunsmoke episodes he had already filmed aired after his death. Country singer Eddie Dean performed at his funeral. Today, he rests at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in the Hollywood Hills. Sam Noonan was the quiet man who poured the drinks, but Glenn Strange was the actor whose face probably terrified more kids than anyone else in American cinema. If you are enjoying these classic TV stories, hit that subscribe button right now. Number 4 on our list made it onto the Gunsmoke call sheet for all 604 episodes he could physically reach, missing only 7 across 20 seasons after undergoing open-heart surgery in 1971. Milburn Stone was born in Burton, Kansas, a tiny town of under 1,000 people, on July 5, 1904. As a kid, he watched the actual town doctor, Joseph Wakefield Myers, making house calls in a horse-drawn buggy. Doc Adams, the country doctor he played for 20 years on television, was modeled directly after that man. Stone actually turned down a congressional appointment to the U.S. Naval Academy at 18 to join a traveling theater troupe. He toured the vaudeville circuit as half of a song and dance act known as Stone and Strain. After a Broadway run in 1934, he hit Hollywood in 1935. The next 20 years vanished into uncredited bit parts in over 150 films. Stone was 51 years old when CBS finally handed him the role that defined his entire life. Doc Adams had a sharp tongue, a soft heart, and served as the conscience of Dodge City. When he snapped at Festus over a beer, the audience knew it was out of love. Silence from Doc usually meant someone was dying. Stone took the job so seriously that he once stormed off set after arguing with a young producer over a compromised scene, famously shouting, "I am too old to scare and too rich to care." He won the Emmy for Outstanding Supporting Actor in 1968. In 1961, just like Amanda Blake, he sold his residual rights to Bees for $100,000, a deal he regretted forever. Stone's first wife, Ellen, passed away in 1937. 2 years later, he married Jane Garrison, and that bond lasted 41 years until his final morning. Together they had a daughter, Shirley, and 4 grandkids. Once Gunsmoke wrapped in 1975, he retired fully, moving to a quiet ranch in Rancho Santa Fe, spending his days fishing and building furniture. Milburn Stone passed away from heart failure at Scripps Memorial Hospital in La Jolla on June 12, 1980. At age 75. He rests peacefully at El Camino Memorial Park in San Diego. Doc Adams was the caring physician who never turned patients away. Milburn Stone endured 51 years and over 150 uncredited roles before anyone knew his name. 5th on the roster is a name nobody expected to find in a Gunsmoke lineup. Yet he spent 3 full seasons there before becoming a household name. Burt Reynolds was 26 back in 1962. When CBS cast him as Quint Asper, a half-Comanche blacksmith who practically became the show's leading man understudy. He stuck around until 1965. That Dodge City set set was actually where he learned how to stand in front of cameras for hours without doing a thing. He was born in Lansing, Michigan in February of 1936, but grew up in Riviera Beach, Florida, where his dad served as police chief. A football scholarship landed him at Florida State, where he excelled as a halfback until a car crash and a knee injury ruined his athletic dreams in a single summer. Acting at FEFSU followed, then New York, leading to his first studio contract in 1959. After Guns, he spent 7 years making movies he later found embarrassing, until Deliverance rescued his career in 1972. Then came The Longest Yard, Smokey, and The Bandit Hooper. And starting over by the late 1970s, Burt Reynolds was Hollywood as top-earning superstar 5 years running, the lead in Die Hard, playing James Bond, and even Han Solo in Star Wars were all offered to him. Insanely, he turned every single one of them down. He admitted in his memoir that passing on Star Wars haunted him. He married Judy Key in 1963, divorcing her just 2 years later. His long romance with Sally Field throughout the late 1970s was something he later called the great love of his life and his biggest regret. Marrying Lonnie Anderson in 1988 brought an adopted son, Quentin, but ended in 1993 with one of the ugliest celebrity divorces ever. He never remarried. His Oscar nomination for Boogie Nights arrived in 1997. Burt Reynolds died of cardiac arrest in Florida on September 6, 2018, age 82. His cremated remains sat with a relative for 2.5 years while the family fought over where to put him. He was finally buried at Hollywood Forever Cemetery in the Garden of Legends section by the lake on February 11, 2021. What would have been his 85th birthday? Quint Asper was the blacksmith of Dodge City. Burt Reynolds became the highest paid movie star in America 15 years later, learning to act while standing at that anvil. Our number 6 left Gunsmoke voluntarily in 1964, fearing the role would swallow him whole. Dennis Weaver spent 9 years playing Chester Good, the limping, slow-talking deputy who hovered behind Matt Dillon with a loyalty that felt like pure devotion on screen. He snagged an Emmy for Best Supporting Actor in 1959, partly thanks to a limp he made up on the spot during his audition, and was stuck with for the rest of the run. He later joked he should have picked a character who could actually walk, since building a campfire with a stiff leg was nearly impossible. Born in Joplin, Missouri in June of 1924, he served as a U.S. Navy pilot in World War II, then returned home to graduate from the University of Oklahoma with a fine arts degree. The same year he graduated, 1948, he competed in the Youth Olympic decathlon trials and finished high enough to become an alternate for the London Games. Actor studio training under Lee Strasberg followed, along with a Broadway run opposite Shelley Winters in A Streetcar Named Desire. He made $60 a week delivering flowers before CB's offered $300 to play Chester. By 1964, his final season, he made $9,000 a week. After Gunsmoke, he starred in 8 more series, Anchored McCloud from 1970 to 1977, and delivered a killer performance in Steven Spielberg's 1971 TV movie, Duel. From 1973 to 1975, he served as president of the Screen Actors Guild. He married his childhood sweetheart, Gary Stahl, in 1945, staying together 61 years until his final day. They raised 3 sons. In 1993, they moved into a 10,000-square-foot solar-powered home in Ridgway, Colorado, built with recycled tires and 300,000 aluminum cans, dubbed River Sage. Dennis Weaver died of cancer on February 24, 2006, at 81. He was cremated, and his ashes were returned to his family. A 60-acre wildlife reserve named Dennis Weaver Memorial Park sits along the Unpangura River in Ridgway. Dedicated to his memory, Chester Good walked with a limp for 9 full seasons. Dennis Weaver was the Olympic decathlon alternate who built his final home out of trash and made sure the garbage collector could tell where the house ended. 7th on the list is the actor who played Gunsmoke's most iconic deputy, hiding everything interesting about himself behind a thick nasal mountain accent. Ken Curtis was born Curtis Wayne Gates in Lamar, Colorado, in July of 1916. His father was the sheriff of Bent County, and Ken grew up above the jail, where his mother cooked for the inmates. While his dad served 2 terms, he went to Colorado College as a pre-med student, but dropped out in 1938 to sing, and NBC Radio hired him as a tenor. And in 1941, he joined the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra as their vocalist. Taking the spot Frank Sinatra had just left, Army service in Italy from 1942 to 1945 came next, earning him a Bronze Star. He spent most of the next decade singing with the Western vocal group, the Sons of the Pioneers. In 1952, he married Barbara Ford, the only daughter of legendary director John Ford. That marriage lasted until 1964, landing him supporting roles in his father-in-law's blockbusters like The Quiet Man and The Searchers, The Wings of Eagles, and The Alamo. Festus Hagen debuted on Gunsmoke in 1962 and joined the main cast in 1964. Curtis based his character on a real guy from his childhood, a fence post cutter named C. Darjack, who always ended up drunk in his father's jail. That voice was pure make-believe. In reality, his singing voice was a clear, smooth tenor. He spent 11 years turning on that famous Festus rasp every single morning. He married Tori Connolly in 1966, staying together for the rest of his life. His final gig was playing the aging rancher Seaborn Tay in the 1991 movie Kanaga, opposite Samaya, with his old Gunsmoke partner Buck Taylor cast as the villain. Ken Curtis passed away in his sleep from a heart attack at his Fresno, California home on April 28, 1991, at age 74. He had just attended a rodeo the night before, seemingly in great health. His wife, Tori, found him when she woke up following a quick cremation. His ashes were scattered across the Colorado flatlands of his childhood near Las Animas. Today, a bronze statue of him as Festus stands at 430 Pulaski Avenue in Clovis, California. Festus Hagen couldn't read a newspaper, but Ken Curtis was a trained tenor who replaced Frank Sinatra and in the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra and married John Ford's only daughter. Number 8 is the only voice on this list still answering the phone. Buck Taylor was 29 years old when he joined Gunsmoke in 1967 as Newly O'Brien, a young gunsmith who rode into Dodge City and became a deputy marshal, staying for the final 8 seasons and 173 episodes. Born in Hollywood in May of 1938, Walter Clarence Taylor III was the son of character actor Dub Taylor. He turns 88 in just a few days. Buck was actually a competitive gymnast, good enough to be sponsored for the 1960 Youth Olympic trials in Rome by actor Ginn Big Boy Williams. He did make the cut. Next came theater studies at USC and watercolor training at the Chaminade Art Institute, plus 2 years in the Navy before going full-time into acting. Milburn Stone and Ken Curtis, he says they pulled him aside during his first weeks on the Gunsmoke set, offering advice that shaped his entire life. Respect your audience and never deny a fan a moment of your time. He has lived by that for nearly 60 years. 2 of his sons are named after his Gunsmoke co-stars, Matthew for James Arness and Cooper Glenn for Glenn Strange. He gave the eulogy at James Arness' funeral in June of 2011. Roles in Tombstone, Gettysburg, Cowboys and Aliens, and Hell or High Water followed over the next 4 decades. His recurring role on Yellowstone as Rancho Emmett Walsh ended in 2022 with one of the most quietly devastating death scenes in the entire series. On December 18, 2025, Roger Ewing, the actor who briefly played deputy at Greenwood for 2 seasons before Newly O'Brien replaced him, passed away in Morro Bay, California, age 83. That morning, Buck Taylor became the final surviving member of the main Gunsmoke cast. He lives on a ranch near Fort Worth, Texas with his second wife, painting watercolors of the American West and designing the annual poster for the Fort Worth Stock Show and Rodeo. Newly O'Brien was once the youngest face in the Dodge City Marshal's office. Now, Buck Taylor is the last face remaining, still painting the wild country his co-stars once rode through, keeping a promise he made to 2 dying men back in 1967. They rode the streets of Dodge City on a soundstage. Today, that legendary cast is scattered everywhere, from a Glendale mausoleum to a Canyon game preserved the Colorado flatlands.